the writing of the job description to vetting the sources of where we're going to be distributing the post or recruiting from, and then also going through the different resumes before involving the hiring manager to review the resumes of the selected candidates, all the way through, again, the onboarding and the firewall of when does my insurance kick in and what are my benefits and how can I sign up for a transit benefit. So on the recruiting for full-time, part-time, and internships as well.
And my name is Daryl Savage. I'm one of 4 sales district leaders in the Chicagoland area. I would say supervise, that's the closest word. I'm not technically the boss of, but I partner with insurance agents for American Family Insurance, 38 of them, and they have about 100 employees or team members themselves. So what I'm looking for are sales agents as well as team members who work for those agents. But I do connect in many cases by social media and face-to-face in the past to meet with people who I think would be a great fit for our organization and our agencies to get to know each other better.
Oh, Kristen, you're on mute.
You guys joining us. Sorry about that. We're going to dive right in. During these unprecedented times, what are some essential job search tips you have for students who are looking for either internships or full-time employment?
Look for the people that are hiring. Obviously, there are companies that have shut down. There are companies that are laying off employees. So you are looking for the companies that are still in business, that have a necessary need and essential, that are essential to the survival of all humanity. I work for a company that works in food. We're still working today. We've not shut down. We've not laid off employees. You're looking for a company that still is working.
I have to agree with Christina. It's keeping your options open and aligning your search with what's still a viable industry, and how does your background and your preparation align with that industry. And sometimes we have to step back and perhaps consider roles and working for companies that may not have necessarily been in our mix previously. And then also, I would also recommend that don't get lost in the sea of the Indeed resume submissions or LinkedIn. Again, align yourself with who is still surviving in this pandemic, and how do I fit, and go do some research directly to their websites and see what's there. You'd be surprised.
And I would build on what Christina and Connie have said. A lot of people are feeling it's the end of the world, and we know that some businesses are really struggling. At the same time, there are some businesses that they've hit the jackpot with how they are considered essential, or all of a sudden maybe they are more in need than others. Insurance happens to be one of those that's as close to recession-proof like food as anything else, because people still need it. So to do your research and figure out where you have a good opportunity, because we know there's a possibility that the last one hired can be the first one let go. So you want to be looking for a company and an industry that you think is healthy. And you know what? You only get one chance to make a first impression, and to make sure that your resume, no matter what you want it to look like, is ready to go at that time that you reach out, because you can't go back and say, oh, I should have said, or I should have changed my resume to whatever. Make sure that you are ready, job and interview ready, when you reach out to people.
All right, thank you. Our next question is, how can students effectively network during COVID-19 as we are practicing social distancing? What tips do you have around that?
Social media. It's all about using the tools that we have and we are all using today. We've got Zoom, we've got, we've got LinkedIn, and we've got Twitter. All of the things that you are using right now in your homes are where employers are looking. So if you have a LinkedIn feed or you don't have a LinkedIn profile, make one. If you've got things that are updated, that needs more updating, make sure that you've got those updated, because we are looking for the candidates that I'm looking for. I'm looking for someone who is active and that's someone who is going to be checking those sites. So if you've made a LinkedIn profile and you've not visited it in the last 2 weeks, you're probably not going to pop up in my search. So keep active.
Mm-hmm. I would also say volunteer is a good opportunity to get your foot in the door somewhere where you might think there could be a future for you. And using your network of family and friends on social media, and anybody that you've ever connected with professionally, as Christina said on LinkedIn. In these times, it's all about who you know and who they know that might be able to crack open a door for you.
And I would say, whether you think it's a wonderful time to start your career or a horrible time, the fact is, you're right. It's mindset. So knowing that if you focus on your uniqueness and your skills, you have opportunities. A reality is the fact that a lot of people have lost their jobs. So you're competing with more. But rather than thinking that puts you at a disadvantage, think about who you're competing with. Maybe you have more technology expertise and skill. Focus on your uniqueness and what makes you different. Think about what is beyond what may be on a resume. What makes you the best candidate? And do some research about who you are contacting. What is that company about? What are they looking for? If you've done your homework, that really, really stands out, rather than connecting with somebody like Connie or Christina and myself and say, well, who are you looking for? What do you want? Your role is to call us and contact us and say, hey, I know what your company does and what you're looking for, and I think I'd be a great asset for your company. Sell yourself. If you won't, who will?
I see that Cody has asked a question off to the right there. He's asking about voluntary separation and what are our thoughts for this time to job change. It depends. It depends on what you want. If this is not the job that you have wanted all your life and it's not making you happy, maybe it is the time for you to look for another position. But again, think of the job market. It is a tougher job market than it was 3 months ago. So keep that in mind too, is that if you do have an opportunity that has knocked on your door, okay, maybe it's time for you to step aside, but never ever step away from a position that you have and that you are secure in without securing another role and having that offer in hand. Because I've seen that too many times as well, where a friend has decided, oh, I'm just going to quit my job and look for something else. There's plenty of jobs out there. And then it's been a year later and they have still not found that job. So keep that in mind as well. Don't jump the gun before you have things settled.
And if I could say, when you're out there and you're looking, network professionally. Make sure your profile is professional. If you end up interviewing, and this is one thing that I can only imagine the other ladies are doing as well, and it ends up being via Zoom or Skype. What's your background? How are you dressed? Are you eating? Things like that can be a real benefit, or can really have somebody remembering that you just were not professional in your opportunity to show who you are. So to take advantage of that. It's one thing to see somebody who's really funny or silly or doing something crazy on Facebook for kicks as a friend. That's not necessarily the presence you want on a professional networking opportunity. And you don't want to start by having to apologize or explain something that doesn't really make a lot of sense.
I definitely have to agree with that. Employers are looking at your social media presence. So make sure that if you don't think you want to show it to your parents, you definitely don't want to show it to your employer. So be smart.
Hey, attendees, you can also ask questions in the chat box. So if you have any questions coming up and you want the panelists to answer, I just want to remind you that you can ask questions there. I'm going to move on a more personal level. How has COVID-19 affected hiring in your organizations?
I can take that one. It's actually had to step back and reassess what our needs are, and what we can actually pause as far as our search goes, and what we need to continue doing. Surprisingly, what we thought we needed ended up opening an opportunity for a much bigger role within the company. And despite the circumstances, we've had a very successful search, and have been able to move paid search in-house, and hired a very talented young man to do to execute the role. So we thought we needed two different positions. It ended up being that, I think at this point we can pause and really look at for future growth what makes more sense. Unfortunately, one of the things that we did pause was internship. Being in downtown Chicago, surrounded by institutions of higher education who've all gone home, since the middle of March, unfortunately has also had to have us pause the search and fulfilling the summer intern roles that we were looking for. At this point, we might be able to resume that search, and we might be able to still identify some very strong candidates. It all depends on timing, and as we all know, we're sitting here on a day-to-day. So that's what we've seen happen in-house.
I keep an eye on that chat box every day. I say a couple of questions that are coming in. So for those who are homemakers or who've taken the time to take care of their children during that time, we as employers notice the gap on your resume. So if you have that time frame and we see a gap, we'll ask you about it. You can address that by stating that I was here from this year to this year as working as a homemaker, and then listing those responsibilities as job duties, because technically when you're working at home and taking care of your little ones, we know it's a job, especially if the hiring manager is a woman, or even if they're a man, because they might be having those same experiences as well. So you can do the same, but if we notice a gap and you are not comfortable with it and you omit it, we'll still ask you about that time frame. For applicants and candidates who are interviewing in person, we are doing, I know for my company, we're doing virtual interviews as much as we can. So getting yourself ready for a virtual interview, making sure that your background's not crazy, that your kids aren't running around, that your dog isn't barking up a storm. Those things are important during virtual interview settings. If you are going on site, absolutely wear a mask. The employer should have those protocols set in place. They probably have a questionnaire that you have to answer to make sure that you aren't currently experiencing any symptoms, that you have checked your temperature before. They might even ask you, if you're going on site, to have checked your temperature beforehand, because as we are in a pandemic, it is an okay question to ask. Now, if the curve has flattened and there's no immediate threat, we don't have to ask that question, but because we are still in a pandemic, we are allowed to ask that question. So absolutely wear a mask. They should have hand sanitizer for you. If you don't have it yourself, bring it along, or if you're not sure, bring it along. Okay. What other questions? I see another message in here. Yep, I'm good.
Well, and I would say, to build on what Christina and Connie have said, don't run away from the fact that if you've taken time off to raise a child or be at home, because quite frankly, if that's something that has not been or isn't received the way you want it to be, when you clearly state it, you probably don't want to work there anyway. If they're not going to value that, then why would you put yourself in that position, male or female? So I think that's important. Why cover it up? If somebody doesn't value how important that role is, then that's either as an organization or as an individual, somebody maybe you don't want to be associated with. And the other thing is, become very savvy when it comes to the new way of networking. Get comfortable with Zoom and with Skype and with Google Duo. If somebody asks you if you can do that, if you have done it before, you don't want to say, I've never heard of it, I haven't tried it, because this is the way that we're interviewing in many cases for the foreseeable future, unfortunately. So to know how to manage your background, to know how to mute yourself, to know how to change the videos, those are things that are important to do. So get comfortable with that. There are all sorts of aids out there that can help you understand how these different technology resources work. So I would stress that, and I would say, how has it changed for us? There's more, as a company, more of a remote mentality. We are expecting more and more people to now work from home, not come into the office, whether it's part of the week or maybe even all of the week. I know, I'll speak for my organization. It's easier if you have a relationship with someone first and then they move to remote, rather than have somebody from the get-go working remotely when you don't really know their work ethic and their skill set. So I would say this is a wonderful time. You will be the first generation that comes out knowing that companies are expecting more people to work remotely and check in virtually like this. So own that, lead in that. Don't be surprised by it. I would say get comfortable with it, because that's a real fail to have somebody ask about being technologically or virtually savvy at this point and you haven't done it yet. So get comfortable.
One of the questions that I see that popped up here is, how has COVID changed the way that we recruit in regards to requiring an individual to relocate geographically versus working remote? I can speak for my company specifically. We've always been a flexible schedule, remote type of format. So when we saw some of our partners, scrambling and struggling to set up remote, their employees remote, and giving them access to VPNs and equipment and phone lines, we were very fortunate that we just said, okay, Monday, everybody just work from home starting Monday. In our search specifically, we always bring that up as part of the conversation. That's, we've recruited people to come work for us all the way from Buffalo, New York, and other places. And in some instances, they choose to relocate. It's not something that we've always said, no, this position is strictly out of the office in Chicago. We're open to, because we're set up to work in that capacity, in the office or remote.
I think I'm on the other side of that. We weren't prepared super for COVID-19 and the remote working. So all of our employees did have laptops. So we did transition to remote working, but we are still recruiting as well. So I actually just hired 2 employees that have started and are starting in the next couple of weeks. I just had one start yesterday. I have another one starting June 1st. So their first weeks are going to be virtual, but eventually they'll have to come into the office to do some hands-on training, because it's not like we can train them on our machines at their home. We can't ship the product to them because it weighs a good amount and it requires a crate. So they actually have to come into our office to actually do that training. And we do have those protocols set up. We do have a questionnaire that they have to answer. We do have PPE in the office. We do have social distancing guidelines in place. So there are a lot of things that we can do, but there are a lot of things that we still have to move towards as we are becoming eligible to go back into the office. Some of it will be voluntarily in these first couple of months, but eventually we will be progressing towards back to the office. So just keeping those things in mind. Hopefully the PPE and the mitigation factors that we'll have set up in that time will be enough. That's my hope anyway.
And I would say to be nimble and to be flexible. We are asking right now for our employees to be more flexible than we've ever asked. And I don't think any of us are probably in a position in a first impression from someone to feel that there's somebody who's not willing to do things differently, because we don't know what the rules are moving forward. So I think it's really important to know that somebody is comfortable in ambiguity, comfortable in not knowing exactly what the future holds, because if somebody's not comfortable with that right now, they're just not going to be comfortable, period, because we don't know what's going to happen. None of us do. And I would say, and I know Christina mentioned it as well, to make sure that the impression that you give initially is appropriate, because nobody will believe that you can have a crying child or a dog barking or people walking back and forth behind you and asking you questions in the interview, and to think that's not going to happen during your workday. So it's about trust and having somebody believe that you can get the job done and separate out your schedule. Show that you can prioritize and you can compartmentalize and you can find a way to be effective in a different and new environment right now, because that's what we're looking for. To Christina's point, we are hiring people for inside as well, but I don't think we will ever go back 100% to the way we were. It's just not happening. There'll be more remote opportunities than we had before this happened.
I see Caitlin asked about average wait times for applying for jobs. That really is dependent upon the employer and how quickly they are looking to hire for their role. I know certain employers do take a long time. I mean, I know we take a ridiculously long period of time to find the right candidate. So it really is dependent on the employer themselves. Check to see how long the position's been open. How long has it been posted? If it's just recently posted, maybe it's something that they're really looking to fill. If it's been out there for a few months, they're probably taking their time and waiting for the right candidate that has all the bells and whistles that they're looking for. So it might be a little bit, it might be faster. It's okay to follow up. Absolutely, to reach out to the contact person, the HR person, the supervisor, whomever is the hiring manager for that role, and say, hey, I put in an application here. I just want to make sure that you received it and where my status is. It's perfectly okay to do that. We know that for candidates that are inquiring, that they are active and they are interested in our role if they do that. So that gives them a little bit of a leg up in that search. So it's okay to ask.
I would say don't take the delays personally. Right now, every day, we're waiting to hear what our corporate decisions are about how we reopen, how many people can be in the office. And don't take silence as a fact that somebody doesn't like you, or, oh, I really blew the interview, or my resume wasn't good enough. That person you're talking to may just be waiting for the next set of instructions. Are the number of people they're hiring, is that different? How many people are going to work from home? How many people are going to come into the office? So just know to have patience at this point, because it could just be a process that is changing within hiring and within the organization itself. So know that none of us know the answer right now.
I agree completely with Daryl. So it's a waiting game sometimes. Again, it's okay to ask. Things could get involved. It also depends on the time of the year. I know right now, May is a horrible month for me because it's the beginning of our fiscal year. I've got open enrollment that's just closed. I've got performance reviews that have just started. So it's just a really busy time for me, and I've got a job search going on. So I'm a little inundated. So don't take being ignored to heart. It's that time of the year for some employers. And if you have to follow up and say, hey, just want to make sure you got my email, again, it's okay to ask.
It is. I will throw out a word of caution, though, to not become the stalker. I've been in that position. It's like, okay, you can't just show up in the office and ask me about the open position. Just practice a little bit of prudency there. Yeah. I think an email once a week, maybe a call once a week. Anything more than that, it's like, I understand you're eager and you're going to stand out, but maybe now you're going to stand out in the bad way.
One email is perfectly fine. 10 emails, a little bit too much. You just want to tone it down there.
Tone it down, and don't show up unannounced. Please don't.
Absolutely don't do that, especially now.
We did get a question from an international graduate asking, of course, it's a challenging time for everybody right now, especially for international students. Do any of your companies take international graduates, and what kind of advice do you have for international students at this time?
I would say for my company, it's about customer service, it's about sales, it's about relationship. And the majority of my agents are first generation. They've come from Mexico, they've come from Eastern Europe, Poland in particular, and Russia, and Guatemala, and Croatia. That's what Chicago is. So I would say for us, it's about people who are establishing an opportunity here long term. I will say, as a sales organization and people who are building their careers, American Family Insurance and other insurance companies working as an agent, that's not something you do for 5 years and then you move on, generally. It's building a career. So it doesn't make sense to spend a lot of time with the investment of paying and not getting to the point where you're rewarded for the fruits of your labor. So I would say in a number of sales jobs, if you're going to be here for a long time, game on. We love it. For a shorter period of time, it may not make enough sense for you, not for the company. Just thinking about the right thing that's for you. We do, as a corporation, our headquarters are in Madison, Wisconsin. And we are continuing to hire. That's not changing at all. In fact, for our CEO, that's something that's very, very important that we reflect our community.
Unfortunately for us, we don't take international students at this time. We just don't have the funds to support the visa costs. So it's just unfortunate for us, but I'm sure there are opportunities out there that we can probably connect you with, that we all have networks that we can tap into if you are needing some assistance.
Yeah, our company did go through that process, and we do have an international employee. It is a process, it is an investment, and I think looking at it from one employee at a time, and looking at the length that they're approved for to work in this country. Work very closely with the process. Again, leverage your network, and you're an international student. You probably went to school with other international students. Where are they reaching out? Who do they know? Or who in your circle came from the same type of background, and what are they doing? That would be a really good place to start.
And I would say, I know I'm biased because my job is in part sales, but I will say everything is sales. You're selling yourself, developing a new relationship with an individual. You sold yourself in order to have an opportunity to get into Roosevelt University. Everything you do is selling. This is your chance to say to a company, if there's the opportunity for them to hire an international student, why is it in their best interest to do it? That's your role, not the company's opportunity or expectation to try to figure out why it's good for them to take you. This is the chance for you to do your homework about that organization and find out what are you bringing that makes it so you are a very, very strong asset. Now, we know that there are some issues when it comes to timing and costs. So I'm talking about if it's an option, to look at that and not give up.
Thank you. We had another question come up. I'm guessing this person was referring to when we were talking about resumes, if you've stayed at home to take care of your children. Does the same go for people who've cared for aging parents? So do those same rules kind of still apply?
Yep. All the same, address the gaps. Otherwise, you know, as the recruiter, you're making assumptions, and you don't want us to do that. Uh, you know, transparency is something highly valued, and addressing whatever it is that you were doing between those time frames is extremely important that you do.
And just know that when you explain something like that, that's not a weakness. That's not
Mm-mm.
that's not an excuse. That's nothing to be ashamed of. Just to explain what the situation is something that you should expect to do.
Yeah,
Why did you switch from
Mhm.
school to school? Why did you not stay at a job for a longer period of time? Why did you have a gap in your work history?
right.
We have to explain things all the time. Just be confident going in that whether it's Connie or Christina or I, we're probably going to ask about it. So don't be taken by surprise. Get ready with your answer before you're sitting down in front of us.
Mhm.
I mean, the gaps that we're going to see now is the same as we have seen as 2008 hit with recession and a lot of people got laid off. Now that there's going to be a gap in 2020 from March to whenever, we're going to know that it was because of this time. All HR managers, directors, we're all going to know and recognize that this time frame is because of the pandemic. So don't be frightened of it, but be open and be transparent, just like Connie, just like Daryl have stated. Always be open with the things that you've done, especially during the time frame, because employers will probably also ask you, what did you do during this time frame? So what things have you embarked on while you were quarantined? Did you learn something new? Did you take a course? Did you learn a language? Did you volunteer by making 1 million masks? You know, we want to know those things too, because that kind of gives us an understanding of your personality and it gives us an opportunity to know you a little bit more and how you would fit within our company.
Take every opportunity as a competitive advantage. What is your story that you can tell to have somebody fall in love with you? To say, oh, that's the sort of person that I want in my organization. So when something like this happens that is totally unexpected, that's somebody who's creative and is going to make the best of it rather than wallowing in change and not being comfortable with not knowing what's happening next. We want to see somebody who makes lemonade out of lemons. And if you can explain that and what you've done, that's great. And these questions about taking care of families, what a wonderful way to show your commitment and loyalty to the family. Quite frankly, we need more of that in this country. So to not go in with your tail between your legs thinking it's a bad thing, but this is a decision you needed to make to take care of your family. But now maybe the story is how eager you are for an opportunity to get back to what you were doing before. And this is what you're going to do to position yourself so you're successful. Use it to your advantage.
Okay, we have another question. How do you explain a gap when you're not taking care of a parent or children? Can you say more than I've been looking for work? And also, what if you're volunteering only once a week, say at a food pantry?
As Daryl stated, you've got to make sure that you're prepared to demonstrate that you haven't just, you know, been applying online, you know, sitting at home behind a computer. What else have you been doing? Have you been immersing yourself in your community? You know, we like to see that that people are there's self-motivation, there's self-improvement, and says a lot about, okay, the impetus of this person to do things on their own and not being told, hey, you have to go do this thing. Even if you're volunteering once a week, an hour a day, once a week, that still says a lot. You're executing a job for no pay, for a very worthy cause, I'm sure. And as we've all said, that shows attributes in an employee that I think will influence the type of employee that you'll be in the office.
And I would emphasize that if you have those gaps, whatever happened, you left school, there were layoffs, please do not blame. Things happen. And I'll tell you, it's not a turn on to me when somebody starts by saying, well, they really shouldn't have done this, and then my supervisor said that, and then because of that I lost my job, or oh no. It's really about how you respond to things that have happened. And if your opportunity is to say, so I took some time to research to make sure this is what I learned from the last experience, and I realized I didn't want to do that. So I spent some time looking for X. There's nothing wrong with doing the work. To Connie's point, sitting on your hands and doing nothing and hoping an employer calls you, that's not doing the work. So to demonstrate what you're doing actively and creatively to move forward and make an impact in your community and in looking for work.
Right, and I think just to kind of go along with what Daryl has stated, you can't change the situation, but you can change how you respond to the situation. So making sure that no matter what, that you're still being optimistic, and you may have just been searching for the right job. You might have just been taking that time to do research on all the companies, or you've been preoccupied with your volunteer work. It's perfectly fine, but just be prepared to answer those questions openly and honestly when the time comes and the interview asks you that question.
We got another question about interviewing. If you're interviewing in person, what if you want to wear a face shield versus a mask? How would that be perceived during the interview?
It's your choice of PPE. If that's what makes you feel safer, then do that. We're not going to fault you for knowing that the face shield is going to protect your eyes from those water droplets that come in from COVID-19. We know that, but it's all up to your comfort level. We know that it's a very odd and very strange time for us, and that wearing the proper PPE is necessary. So if it comes in the form of a face shield, we're okay with it. Honestly, I'm okay with it. I don't know what other employers think, but I'm sure Connie and Daryl probably think the same.
Yep.
No, I'm absolutely offended by it. No, just kidding, of course.
No.
The reality is, if somebody's not going to let you show up in a manner that you feel is necessary to be safe, again, you probably don't want to work there. If they're going to do that to you in the first appointment you have together, what other things are they going to make you do that you're not comfortable with? So it's they don't know the age of family members or the vulnerabilities of health. So I would say do what you need to and what you're comfortable with, and that may be a barometer for you to just see as you court each other if that's the sort of company you want to work with based on how they react.
And I think honestly, it's okay to ask for a virtual interview and say, hey, I'm really not comfortable at this time. Can we move this to a Zoom interview? Can we move this to Microsoft Teams, or whatever outlet is comfortable with you? So absolutely,
Agreed.
you can push for a virtual interview, ask for that. If they're not comfortable with it, then maybe their COVID response has not been as proactive as it should have been.
Agreed. Agreed.
Okay, we have another question. How are older, say 50 to 60-year-old applicants perceived?
Seasoned. So I know for me, for candidates that have come in that have more experience, especially in sales, we know that they're more savvy than our novice sales, our junior salesperson. So absolutely, bring them in. Mm-hmm. But for certain individuals, 50, 60 years old, coming in for like a customer service representative entry-level position, probably not the best fit. It really is dependent upon the role that you're applying for. It depends on what you're looking to do. Again, if you have a great amount of experience being in that age bracket, apply for the things that you think that you want and that you think you can get, and then make your resume sing to those attributes.
Mm-hmm. I agree with Christina. It's not the age, doesn't matter. It's what you can demonstrate on paper, because let's face it, that is your calling card. We're going to peruse the resume and see why you thought your experience is a fit with the position that we have open. regardless of where you went to school or how old you are.
And just the fact that you asked the question tells me that internally you're thinking, well, maybe other people are wondering about a 50 or 60-year-old. So I'm thinking, why dodge it? Explain the rationale. And why specifically have you made the decision at this point? Rather than pretending that the elephant is not in the room, why not address it? And I would just say, do not fall into stereotypes. Do not talk as a 50 or 60-year-old about, well, all of this LinkedIn and this social media stuff, I'm not with that technology. Don't do that. That's not going to help.
Or back in the day, don't say
back in the day. Talk about the fact that here's how you've gotten up to speed. Not only do you have the strengths that Christina and Connie are talking about, but here's a surprise, something you may not have thought about me. And I think that just positions you differently. Now you have a competitive advantage.
It really comes down to, do you have the experience for the job?
Yeah.
Is the experience applicable to what you're applying for? And would you make that position better, or would you deter from the other candidates that have applied? So why are you the better candidate? And it might absolutely not have to do anything with your age. It might just have to do with your experience level. Maybe you're not the best candidate because you don't have a certain amount of experience in whatever it may be. Maybe it's Zoom calls, maybe it's database or spreadsheets, who knows, whatever it is. But don't also stereotype yourself. Don't think of those biases upon yourself. Don't pigeonhole yourself and say, okay, well, I can't apply for this because I don't have this experience. Demonstrate that you can learn it. Figure out the things that you've not had experience before, and demonstrate how you've learned those things and made yourself better by those.
There's a piggyback question here. Are older candidates viewed as expensive? And I think that's a really good question. When you're applying to jobs, we should be doing our research, and be prepared to answer the question of, you're applying to a $50,000 a year job. Tell me why you're.
Poor Connie.
Right out of the gate, I'd like to make sure that, are you aware that this is the job and this is what it pays? Are you so interested in speaking with me today? And you'd be surprised how many times yes. And the conversation then comes up as to why. I need to reorder my priorities. I have other things happening at home, and this type of role would lend itself to that. And yes, my resume has a wealth of experience, but that doesn't mean that I'm looking for a six-figure salary, because this is what I'm looking for. Older candidates are not necessarily expensive.
No, it really is dependent upon the experience level. So if you've been in a sales position from, 1980 to like 2020, absolutely you're going to be more expensive because you've got 40 plus odd years of experience in sales from that time. We know you're at a certain level, right? But if in fact you have switched from role to role and different roles in different capacities of those positions, we know if you're a savvy HR person, okay, well, this is the job median and salary range for this position. And this person has this amount of experience in this role. So we already know how much you've made. So it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with being older and being more expensive. It has to do with the experience level of the position the position that you're applying for and how much experience you've had in that role.
Mm-hmm. And one thing, Teresa and Kristen, if you guys don't mind, one thing I wanted to make sure we address, because I thought it was a really telling question and a good one, and that's about the cover letter and how important that is. A lot of these things that we've been talking about, what a great place to explain it. You are, with the resume, there's certain expectations of education and employment history and information about yourself. You do get to a point where you run out of space, and there can be some things that just in that format aren't explainable about the history. This is a great place to jump off of the page, show your personality, show your uniqueness. And a cover letter is a great way to explain a number of these different questions that you've had, I think. I mean, let's face it, you're not going to be addressing your age in a resume.
Not
Well,
unless
you
you're
could
an international person. So anyone in Europe already has that on their resume. But for the United States, it's completely different.
absolutely. You get a chance to tell your story, how you got to this point, what you've learned. And if you talk about something you've learned and you made a decision, a career change, then that tells us, well, that person's going to be older. They've tried some other things. Now they're doing something different. So I would say keep that in mind, and don't use a cover letter as a filler, like it's an obligation. Oh, I don't like doing these, I'm just going to send it. This is the chance for me to see something different other than the obligatory things that have to be, quote unquote, on a resume. That shows the creativity to me. So I think that is definitely a deal maker, more than a potential resume being a breaker in some cases for me, because there are things that can be explained there that really can't be addressed in a resume.
If I may, I'll be honest. I don't read cover letters. I go straight to the resume. I look at your.
Person again.
I look at your experience, and above that I look at internships. Did you pursue any, and were they also aligned with the role that you're applying for? I've seen, not to say that I haven't seen cover letters and I haven't read them, but I don't necessarily prioritize resumes because they have a cover letter. I'd rather see a very well organized resume with that tells me that you understand the job that you've applied for.
I mean, I know for myself, I don't receive.
They're just hitting apply, apply, apply. So I'm like, I want to see those resumes. I want to see the alignment.
Absolutely, that resume is very important. But I know for myself, I don't know, Daryl or Connie, how many cover letters you actually see. I don't see virtually any anymore.
No, not very many.
I mean, just because of how the job market's been, because we've been pulling candidates ourselves from our own searches. I know for myself, I've not received a lot because the candidates that are applying are the people that I've asked to apply for the job. So I don't see too many cover letters anymore. Not to say that they're not important. Absolutely, if you have something that you need to say that you can't get across in your resume, absolutely write that resume.
Sure.
But I know I don't see too many because it's just the nature of how my job searches go.
Mm-hmm. And to be clear and build on to what Connie said, the fact is, if there's a real poor resume, there's no way I'm getting to the cover letter. It starts with that, because I wouldn't waste my time if there are, now back to professionalisms, there's typos, the typeset and things just look sloppy. I don't care what you could be J.K. Rowling in a cover letter. It doesn't matter, because we're not going to look at it. So I think it's really important to know that one thing builds to the next. But just the way now we submit a lot more resumes online and things like that, cover letters aren't as simple, just don't have that as much.
I've definitely turned away candidates because they've had more than a few grammatical errors and typos on their resume, because they've just been sloppy. And when the job responsibilities actually say attention to detail, it's that detail in your resume, it's absolutely critical. So you have to be really, really prepared to make sure that those things are very neat and tidy before you send them out.
And I would say a special props to Roosevelt. One of the things that your school appeals to me so much is non-traditional students, and so many people of different languages. Now, that said, and the excitement with that, not an excuse for saying, well, I can be sloppy, they'll understand. There's a big difference. The goal is to be the best that you could be in whatever the situation is. Let someone else, if I was applying for a job as a chemist, that's a different language. I would have somebody else look at it maybe who can help me through that to make sure I'm not making those mistakes, even though it may not be natural to me. Put yourself in a position where you have a chance to be chosen and not turn one of us off so badly because of those mistakes that we don't get to the next step.
Hey, we have another question. If you qualify for more than one role at a company, is it frowned upon if you apply for multiple positions?
No, but just make sure that you are qualified to do either one of those.
No matter what the position, I think I want to see a logical reason based on your skill set and what your ultimate goals are that you would want to be in that role. Where to me, I would frown upon it is when it's clear that there's a natural match in one place and then the next person, that there's no way that person should be applying for that role. It becomes clearly they just want to get into the building and it's not necessarily the right thing for them. So nobody wants to hire in that second, that number 2 department if it's not the right person. So I would just say be really careful if it's not the right fit. You could have 2 that are fit, and then I agree that maybe it makes sense. I can't say I've experienced it enough. I'm sorry, go ahead, Christina.
Yeah, if you've got a prudent HR manager that knows the open positions and sees all the resumes, they'll know that you qualify for more than one role, and they'll give that resume to the other hiring manager. So I wouldn't be too concerned by applying to all of the jobs. All of the resumes may just go to one location. So you might just be sending multiple copies of your resume to the one person who's reviewing for all of the jobs.
Okay, so we're going to end up our questions. You guys have answered so beautifully, and the questions that have come in have been awesome. So for the last one, what are absolute musts versus absolute no-nos on a resume?
Absolute must for me, education. So many times you see resumes come through and I don't know where you went to school, or I don't know what year you started working. For some reason, people are opting to are forgetting to include years on their resume. So that, for me, that's an absolute must. Make sure your school is there. Make sure your degree and when you attained it, your jobs, your progression in your different jobs, and tell me a story. Give me a timeline.
Objectives, I don't think are necessary on resumes anymore. So you don't have to put an objective on a resume. Absolutely, your career experience and your positions, your responsibilities, the time for each of those roles, if you've had advancements in those companies. So if you've had more than one position for the same company, absolutely list those out in detail. Hey, I had this position from this time frame. I then was promoted to this position at this other time frame, and then go from there. So those are musts for me to see. Don't necessarily need to see a lot of your extracurriculars from school unless you feel as though they're important. If you feel that your time on the baseball team has led you to be a team player and is good for sales, okay. But it's not super necessary unless you feel it's super important to you, that you want to make sure that you know, hey, I know that this hiring manager used to be a professional or minor league baseball player. I want to make sure that I've got, that simpatico with them. Go ahead and put it on, but not super necessary for me anyway.
One thing I will recommend, do your research on keywords that are related to the job that you're applying to, and make many times the automated services are scanning resumes that way. So either, as Christina mentioned, objectives may not necessarily be that important anymore, but listing your very specific skill set and integrating those keywords is.
Yeah, if the position you're applying for requires that you need to know Salesforce, SPSS, Excel, list all of those things, because those are important for the position itself. So absolutely. The other thing that you should be doing is tailoring those resumes to the positions that you're applying for. So if you're applying for an accounting role and you need to know Excel, absolutely make sure that you have Excel in your resume. If you're applying for that sales role, make sure that you've got all that customer experience that you had from your years at Shake Shack, I don't know, that you have been able to handle a lot of different customer situations and different scenarios. So you have that in your bag of tricks, so to say.
And the only thing I would add on to what Connie and Christine have said is, if possible, multiple accurate ways of contacting you that are personalized. When there's just one, or when the person who picks up the phone is someone else rather than you, if it's going through a work email that isn't personalized and other people have access to it, then that makes us uncomfortable too. So we just want to make sure it's the right way to contact you and that it is updated. There have been numbers that are wrong and phone numbers. That obviously is a major turnoff.
Oh,
So
and
you just want to make sure you get that right.
if your email is something that is not your name and your name at all, might want to change that. We don't need to know that you are crazy into cats24@aol.com. Okay, so just make sure that you've got a professional email address.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, on that note, we are going to wrap up. But thank you again, Daryl, Connie, Christina, for sharing all of these tips and your expertise with our students and alumni. You provided great information, and I'm sure it's been very helpful to all of our attendees. So thank you again for participating. I am going to share with you guys just our contact information. So students, alumni, keep in mind that if you are wanting to schedule a career counseling appointment, this is our contact information. Our office is currently closed, but we are doing phone appointments and appointments via Zoom as well. So if you are interested in scheduling an appointment to go over your resume, mock interview, need help looking for a job, please feel free to reach out to us at either our email or our phone number. And also keep in mind, our next workshop that we are going to be hosting is going to be on June 11th at 4 o'clock, and that one is going to be on self-care and work-life balance. So please stay tuned for more details to come about registering for that workshop. And if you do have any questions about that or any other workshops that might be coming up this summer, please feel free again to reach out to us. So thank you again, everybody, for joining, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye.
Safe.
Bye.